All right, good evening again, or good morning whenever you're watching this. We've been dealing with this lesson that Jesus taught. A lawyer had asked him a question: what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, what does the Bible say? He put it this way: what saith the law? That was the Bible they had back then. They had the Old Testament. And the lawyer responded by saying, well, love the Lord your God with all of your mind, soul, strength, and thy neighbor as thyself. And Jesus said, you've answered well. That's right. And the lawyer realized that having said that, probably figured that next question coming out of Jesus' mouth might be, and have you done this? To forestall that, the lawyer says, well, who's my neighbor? Now, when the lawyer asked that question, he asked, as I mentioned last week, he asked the wrong question. He asked, who is my neighbor? In order that I can find out, well, I have to take care of this person and that person and that person, but not those persons. Just who are the ones that I am responsible for? Who are the ones that I have to give an answer for? And Jesus realized that, being who Jesus was, realized that the lawyer was trying to limit his responsibilities. There are a lot of people who ask really good questions, but they ask them to justify themselves rather than to gain any information. He wanted to justify himself. He wanted to look good to himself and to others, rather than humbly asking, what do I really need to do? So Jesus gave him this account. And we'll read it again just to keep it fresh in our minds. It's in Luke chapter 10, begin to read in verse 30. A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, and left him half dead. And by chance, there came down a certain priest that way. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise, a Levite. Now we understand what a priest was. We know that a priest had to do with the worship services in the temple or the synagogue. A Levite was more of the practical side. He had to take care of making sure that everything was just where it should be, that the vessels were all clean. He had to deal more with housekeeping than with the religious, spiritual side of it. But he was involved nonetheless in temple worship. So this Levite, when he was at the place, he came and looked on him. Now that implies he did a little more than the priest. The priest, when he saw him, just passed by on the other side. The Levite came and looked on him. But the result was the same. He passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow he departed. He took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said to him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Jesus stops the account, looks at the lawyer, and says, which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? Well, the poor lawyer really only has one answer. I mean, if Jesus had asked you that question and said, okay, this is what the priest did, this is what the Levite did, and this is what the Samaritan did, and which one do you think was the good guy? And the lawyer, between a rock and a hard place, says, he that showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, go and do it likewise. As we mentioned last week, the lawyer was interested in defining his obligations. What do I have to do? What is the list that I have to follow? And that is what a lot of people do today. They want to know, what's my job description? Who do I have to be nice to and who do I not have to be nice to? Too often we want to know who we're required to serve and who we can just, pass by. We want to know the minimum requirement. We'd never put it this way, but often we're trying to find out the least we can do and still consider ourselves good Christians. As I said last week, some people set the barrier rather high. Some people set it rather low. It doesn't matter where you set it. It really doesn't matter at all, because if you operate from that viewpoint, we're missing the point. You set the bar high, that's not necessarily love, that's legalism. It's the kind of thing that satisfies our ego. Well, I did what I had to do. And that's the difference between true Christianity and false Christianity. Whatever you do, whatever your area of service, the question you have to ask yourself and be confident in the answer: am I doing it out of love? Or am I doing it because that's the job description? How do you tell the difference? Well, if you're grudgingly doing what you have to do, you're probably not doing it out of love. If you're making comparisons to what you're doing as opposed to what Susie so-and-so is doing, you're probably not doing it out of love. You're doing what's expected. That's all. Love, on the other hand, produces an attitude of thankfulness. Love does the same thing that other people do, but out of a desire to care for someone else. As we noted, we don't know anything about the man. We don't know the name of the man who was in the ditch. We don't know the name of the priest. It didn't matter. It was a certain priest, which is just an expression that says it was just one of those priests. A certain Levite, just one of those Levites. A certain Samaritan, no name, because again, it doesn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the man was in the ditch and needed help. This Samaritan was operating from a position where the priest and the Levite should have been operating. A Samaritan was somebody who was in a genealogical strain. Jews had at one time during the Babylonian captivity, they had married into groups that were not Jews who lived around Jerusalem. Because of that, they were looked down upon by the pure Jews. They were considered to be lesser people. Jesus was one time accused of being a Samaritan. Why, you have a devil and a Samaritan. You're a Samaritan. You're just one of those worthless people. You remember when Jesus had to go through Samaria? He was going to meet up with a woman at the well. She didn't know that, but he did. His disciples didn't know it, but he did. The disciples go into town to get food and water because they're on the journey. She comes to the well, and Jesus is sitting there. She's a Samaritan, he's a Jew. As she's drawing water, Jesus asks her for a drink of water. Now, I don't know if it was his clothing, his demeanor, what said to her that he was a Jew, but she knew. And she was amazed. You, a Jew, you're asking a Samaritan to help you? Again, she was convinced that there was this great gulf fixed between them. Here's a Jew, there's a Samaritan, never the twain shall meet. So as we see this Samaritan coming down the road, and Jesus is telling the story, he could have made that man anyone he wanted to, and he made him a Samaritan. He had a very low opinion of the priests and the Levites of the day, so he's going to compare them to a Samaritan. He felt those priests and Levites, they were blind guides. They strain at a gnat, swallow a camel. You clean the outside of the cup. The inside is all full of greed and self-indulgence. He said, you blind guides, first clean the inside of the cup, and then the outside will be clean. See, on the outside, they look good. These Samaritans, these despised people, they didn't worship in the right place. They had, like I said, intermarried with non-Jews. It was a Samaritan, not the priest and the Levite, who was acting in accordance with the true meaning of the law as it's presented in the Old Testament. Now, the priest and the Levite, they were following the letter of the law. And they used the letter of the law, I'm sure, to justify their lack of response, their lack of love. The Samaritan, on the other hand, acts out the spirit and the intention of the law by loving sacrificially. He took pity on the man. He cared about the man, that's true, but that wasn't enough. It's not enough to have a feeling about something. It's not enough to just care about somebody's problems. It isn't sufficient to merely feel sorry for him. So who is my neighbor? Who do I feel sorry for? Who do I want to have pity upon? You don't need to look across the waters. You don't have to look to Africa or Asia or even South America. You don't even need to go looking. You just have to be aware of the ones that God brings into your life. Now, if there's a need by somebody in Africa and God lays that on your heart, yes. But we need to realize that our first responsibility is to the neighbor, and the neighbor isn't the person who lives in the next numbered house to you. The neighbor, Christ is trying to get this across, Your neighbor is whoever God brings into your life as you're walking down the road. The Samaritan wasn't on the lookout for a needy person. He wasn't going like this and saying, well, who can I help? Who can I help? He's just walking down the road. He's going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He wasn't doing a scan to find somebody else. He was simply aware of his surroundings. He was simply open to what God was doing in his life. He saw the opportunity God presented, and he took it. And in doing so, he made a difference in a person's life. Did he alter the world? Did he shake up the country? Did he amaze the whole town? No. He only affected one man. Or did he? Did he affect the innkeeper? Did he affect the other travelers that were coming by? We have no idea. Fortunately, we have no idea. Because you see, if we knew how much good we were doing, it might tend to give us a big head. All we know about the Samaritan is he took action. Not to pacify his own guilt, not to satisfy himself. He saw the needs of the injured man. He poured oil and wine for healing and disinfectant. He took the injured man and put him on his own horse or his beast of burden, whatever it was, which meant now the Good Samaritan is having to walk. The injured man is riding. He took him to the inn, the nearest place, paid for his care, promised an unlimited amount for whatever additional thing that the innkeeper would incur taking care of the man. He wasn't concerned about what was doing right or what was required. He was showing the need the man had. Well, in our situation, it would be good for us to realize that God brings in these times. Our responsibility is simply to be aware. We don't know how many times we had the opportunity of entertaining an angel unawares. Somebody had a need, a glass of water. Oh, you say that's not what's it. Remember, Jesus used that illustration. You fed me. You gave me water when I was thirsty. You clothed me. When did we do that? When you did it to the least of these. The account that Jesus gave this man put the man on a defensive. It reminded him, first of all, that he is not only not loving the Lord as he should, but he isn't even taking care of the Samaritan as he should, the injured man as he should. It's not up to us to ask, who's my neighbor? It's up to us to ask, who do I have an opportunity to serve? Who do I have an opportunity to care for? Who do I have an opportunity to love? If we get nothing else out of this account that the Lord Jesus used to instruct the lawyer. Get this. Ministry is not confined to a pulpit. It's not confined to a mission house. Ministry is anything God puts in your way where you can make a positive difference. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing that shakes the world. It could be something that only affects one person, and maybe only one person will ever know about it. Of course, you will know about it. And God will know about it. I wonder sometimes how many mansions are built on inconsequential little acts of mercy as opposed to humongous cathedrals. It's not up to us to make explosive statements or humongous deeds. It's not up to us to be successful. It is up to us to be faithful. The Good Samaritan was faithful. I know one little act would have gone unobserved. How many Good Samaritans have gone down roads and done something just like this man did, and no one knows about it? No one except them, and no one except God. You see, the only reason we can make a big deal out of this one is because Jesus told the story. Otherwise, we don't have anything. You may have done some deed that was good, and no one knows about it. Never forget, God knows about it. Let us redouble our intentions, our consecration, to be on the lookout for that opportunity, that person in the ditch who needs a little help. That person has just become your neighbor. Thank you again for our time together. Most of us are mourning the loss of a loved one. Beverly Greeley has passed on. We all recognize that she, of course, is in her better place. She was fully aware of the fact that absent from the body was present with the Lord. Her joy at this moment knows no bounds. Our sorrow knows no grief yet, knows no depth of grief. It is our intention to do something. We're not sure what yet. There will be a graveside service private to the family. There is a visitation in Worthington on Saturday morning. But this church has lost a sister, a lovely lady, who will be missed. And we want to observe that in some way. We will be letting you know exactly what we're going to do. We're still asking questions and looking for answers. Please pray for the family. Please pray for one another. Thank you.